You're listening to Craven Chronicles, your go-to podcast to discuss the highs, the lows, and everything in between supporting Fulham FC. Welcome to the show. Today we'll be discussing how Fulham have dropped to 11th in the Premier League table after last week's demoralising 1-0 defeat at Villa Park, and coupled with results not going our way that weekend, teeing up an absolute must-win for Marcus Silva's boys against his former side Everton on Saturday. Talking of Marcus Silva, breaking news sent shockwaves across the Fulham fan base yesterday as Al Hilal have submitted an offer to prize the Portuguese from Craven Cottage. And we'll be debating, has Marcus Silva taken Fulham as far as he can? And joining me to get stuck into some meaty topics this week is Oscar O'Kane. How are you, mate? And it was actually your chums at Talksport, your colleagues at Talksport that broke that news. So do you have any insight into that?
It was, yeah. Good old Alex Crookie and Sean O'Brien were all over it. Yeah, we were gonna so actually we were gonna record the podcast yesterday, but when we both saw the breaking news, we thought better to do it today. So we've got time to digest and reflect some shocking news. Yeah, broke the news, and it sort of slightly broke my heart when I read the email, but it is serious. The interest is pretty concrete, and Al Hilal with all their billion-dollar backing. Obviously, we know that Silva has rejected things in the past before, but I wonder if he's going to be tempted. As you said, has he taken Fulham as far as he can?
Yeah, well, it was Danny Murphy on Talksport who kind of said he thought he has maybe. So yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll get stuck into that. Maybe a bit of a debate going as well. But
Mm.
let's briefly touch on Aston Villa last week. It was, of course, a 1-0 defeat. Yuri Tillemans' first half goal. Yeah, well, did you watch the game? You're in Ireland, having it large in Cork, as rumours the tabloids are saying.
I did not manage to catch it. No, I instead managed to catch the local jazz band in the town, as I was having a couple of Murphys. But I did see the highlights and I did check my phone. Um, yeah, shocking. Really poor performance. We didn't really lay a glove on them that much. And Tielemans, I mean, Tielemans is, I think he's probably been Villa's best player this season, hasn't he? He's got to be up there. I know people have been saying Morgan Rogers, but I think Tielemans, he's one of those players. I think this season he's consistently dropping 7 out of 10s. He's just always, I've never really seen him put in a bad performance in a Villa shirt so far this season. But you and I obviously were debriefed. I thought we'd get a point. I thought we'd at least get something from this game. But Villa Park, obviously, they had to bounce back after their disappointing end of the season sort of form, really. And yeah, 1-0 defeat, really disappointing, actually. I mean, I really, really, I mean, especially in a game where if we'd won, we would have closed it down to 3 points. It's disappointing to leave it. And yeah, we've been cut adrift really from Villa now, haven't we, completely?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, I was watching it. That sounds like a much better listening to some Irish music than watching that game. To be honest, I had the displeasure of watching it. I
Yeah.
was in a pub in Bermondsey. It was we did the Bermondsey Beer Mile on
Oh,
Saturday.
yes.
So I met up early with my mate who's a fellow Fulham fan, and we suffered together watching it, numbing the pain with some £8 IPAs. But there we go. But yeah, it was incredibly disappointing, wasn't it? I was not confident at all. As you remember, I just thought terrible record at Villa Park. I never thought we were going to get any points. But what disappointed me was the performance. I thought we looked really
Mm,
static, all over the pitch. Looked very easy to play through. I know, as you mentioned, Tielemans ran the show, um, and their midfield just got the better of ours. But it was just too easy to play through. Like Marlon hit the bar at the end. Watkins missed a couple of probably easy chances, and then going forwards. I mean, it didn't really offer much at all. I don't think. There was the Sessegnon disallowed goal, which we can
mm.
discuss in a second. But yeah, it's in terms of key action. I mean, I've kind of brushed over a bit there. It was Tielemans' header from a corner, and I think it's becoming a bit of an issue now with conceding corners and set pieces.
Yeah, we conceded one against Southampton, didn't we? And it's sort of
Yeah,
like, well, I think we said there it was like a brilliant delivery. You can't really defend it. But the Tielemans goal, And also Tielemans is tiny, it's not
Yeah, exactly.
not exactly like it's Onana, 6'3" Onana rising and planting into the bottom corner. It's Tielemans. Like it's actually it's all sort of borderline embarrassing. He's kind of and he's no like Diogo Jota's small for Liverpool and he always scores headers, but it's not like you wouldn't say Tielemans is an aerial threat or target. So yeah, another disappointing manner to concede that goal as well. I do agree with that. It's the fact that it was a set piece that undid us. We know that Villa can play extravagant, free-flowing, attacking football, but just a simple set piece, we get undone again. It's just maybe it's something that Marco needs to address. I feel like we have conceded a few set pieces this season, and I think there's a question mark over kind of the marking really. I think when I watched it back. I don't know what Marco tells the players, but I feel like it's a sort of zonal marking situation, which I always think is a little bit dangerous. I feel like players are not really tracking their men, and it's sort of like the kind of like, well, we'll just defend our 6 yard line and just kind of hope for the best. And it didn't really work, and such a disappointing goal to concede, really.
Yeah, exactly. And then Tielemans nearly scored an absolute banger, which Leno
Mm.
tipped. Leno just about got fingertipped to, which actually was given as a goal kick, which is quite funny. And then
Yeah,
yeah,
I saw
Watkins
his little
just
cheeky
yeah.
grin when it
If
was
anything, he
done.
probably wants it to go for a corner so that everyone can acknowledge the save. But yeah,
Exactly.
Leno definitely kept us in it in that one. Yeah, a few more chances, Villa. I want to talk about the Sessegnon goal. Did you think it was handball or not? Because just quickly what I thought on it, like I
Yeah.
get yeah, it's touched his hand, and I'll probably be calling for it to be a handball for the other way, but there's not really much he could do. But then you could argue that he's affected the flight of the ball and everything, so it's probably the right decision. But if I'm being
Yeah. Well,
biased, I thought it was a bit harsh.
yeah, well, after seeing that Arsenal penalty, Lewis Skelly handball, it does make you think, well, maybe Sessegnon's isn't isn't that
Yeah,
bad, really. I agree with you. I think it was a harsh one, but I do think it's one of those ones where I think if the goal stands, I would be fuming if I was a Villa fan. I'd be like, well, it has hit his hand, and that's helped him kind of shifted the momentum of the ball and
yeah,
kind of helped him in this finish. So I kind of get it from both sides, but I do agree with you. I think it was a difficult decision. But if I'm being honest with you, if that goal had stood and we come away with a point, I think that would have been a bit of a robbery, if I'm
yeah,
being
yeah,
honest. We
yeah.
just
You're right.
were so outplayed across the entire 90 minutes. And look, I get it. Like, Villa have got some outstanding players. They've obviously got a better team than us. They've got a better bench than us. I thought what was really striking again was their squad depth. We're
Mm.
bringing on players like Reed, hasn't had a lot of minutes. They're bringing on players like Donyell Marlon, played in the Champions League final last season. There's levels to the game really. And from a Fulham perspective, we just haven't really quite got that depth ready to compete with the big boys like the Villas. And of course, they've got massive backing and really ambitious owners. So I understand it from that point, and a brilliant manager in Unai Emery. But I really thought that our lack of squad depth was laid to bear there at Villa Park.
Yeah, let's jump into some talking points then. Harrison Reed came on, as you mentioned, and then got injured almost straight away, which is a bit of a shame. But it
Yeah.
did mean that Fulham had to see out the game with 10 men because Marco had used all five subs. And this has happened
Mm,
once before, if you remember. I can't remember the exact game. It was at Craven Cottage.
mm.
Was it Bournemouth? I can't remember the exact game, but we had to see out the game. Is that naivety from Silva to use all five subs that early? I mean, because there was still
Yeah.
15 minutes to go. But then on the flip side, you'd be kind of, you'd be criticizing him for not making the subs, wouldn't you?
Agreed. I feel like every week we always talk about substitutions of the mark, and now
Yeah,
it's like he doesn't make a sub quick enough, or he uses up all his subs too soon, and then we're left with 10 men. And you're right, this has happened a few times this season. I actually think I remember it happening against Manchester City at the Etihad. I think we had to play with 10 men for the last like 15 minutes against sort of Haaland, which I don't think ended up too great for us in the end. But I don't know. I think it's difficult, isn't it? I think how could he have known if Reed was going to get injured that quickly? I mean, it's the risk that you take, though. Obviously, if you use up all your subs, I feel like you just have to manage it better. because clearly he hasn't quite got the balance right with our substitutions. It's either you try and like I would say if I was Marco, you at least leave one sub with 15 minutes left plus added time to go. At least one sub just in case there is an injury or in case you want to make a sort of last minute impact and get on a super sub to try and make the difference. So I agree with you. I think it was difficult. I think it was a difficult kind of decision in terms of his substitutions, and I think that's something that maybe he has to look at and he has to assess for next season. And again, I think coming back to our squad depth, it's the situation of well, maybe he feels that he's forced to make these changes because we haven't the personnel that we're putting out on the pitch there. Maybe they're lacking. Then maybe they. I mean, I do sometimes think as well these Fulham players, especially the style of play that we play, maybe they're all a bit knackered. They're
Mm.
probably all shattered. It's coming to the end of the season. I know it's the crunch time where we're still in the fight, but I think squad rotation is so important. You look at, I mean, you look at Arsenal yesterday. That's kind of what's undone them this season. Lack of squad rotation from Arteta, and I think with Silva, at times I felt that he's overworked players. You look at players like Robinson. He's someone that I think has been, obviously been brilliant, deserves his plaudits, but he's been massively overworked, and hence why he missed last week's game. So we have to take all of that into account. So yeah, something that Marker definitely needs to sort out. Well, if he's here next season,
Yeah.
having said,
Well,
of course.
just what you touched on earlier on players getting overworked. It was announced Castagna is out for the season. Do you see the photo? Him on it, like,
Did
I think he was at
I
home with
did?
like a big boot on. Turns out he's been having issues with his like tendons or something in his foot for the past 4 months, which
Yeah.
obviously with Tete out the whole time, he's another natural right back. He's had to play every game, and
Mm,
it's been noted that he has his standards have dropped. I still think he's been decent, but I think the past 4 months his usual standard is been slightly lower, which explains the injuries, and it goes to show I think the squad is quite thin, isn't it?
mm,
Which
absolutely.
why we have to play a slightly injured player. It was time to say with Robinson. I think he had underlying issues, but you kind of have to play him. And yeah, in contrast to Villa, of their like incredible depth, is we just don't have that. Which I mean, if we did get into Europe, it would be I don't know. I think you need some serious investment in the summer because the squad is very small. But yeah, in terms of Europe though,
Mm.
Fulham dropped to 11th in the table because
Um,
Bournemouth won at Arsenal, Brentford beat United, Brighton drew with Newcastle, which was actually a very
Huge.
important is that goal in the last minute. But now
Mm,
what it means is 2 points separates Bournemouth in eighth, Fulham in 11th, 53
mm.
points, 51 points. Brentford sneaking up there in 10th. What's your
Yeah.
what's your what's your assessment on the mini league, the ever-changing mini league?
Well, Brentford shocked me. I mean, I was the two results that have shocked me is Brentford firstly beating Forest. Didn't see that coming. And I did not see Bournemouth beating Arsenal. When I saw Bournemouth beat Arsenal, I did think there was a bit of dread in me, thinking I feel like the momentum they're going to get from that kind of result is going to get them over the line, get them into eighth. But I will say, obviously we have touched on it, but Bournemouth still have really, really difficult games to see out the rest of the season. I mean, they've got Villa at home this weekend. Then they've got Manchester City away. So they haven't got easy games. Really, really difficult games in there. So I could see them still, I could see them easily losing those two games. And I do think, actually, I think looking at this European battle, I think if we beat Everton on Saturday, I think it's so whoever wins the game at the G Tech will get eighth. That's
It's
my
a
opinion.
big game, that, isn't it?
It's a massive, massive game. And I think it's huge. And I actually think that the winners of that will get Conference League. I think it's that big of a game. So we know when we talked about Brentford in the past, I think we've said it many months ago on the podcast, talking about our derby. And what makes a good derby? These kind of games, if
Mm.
Fulham go to Brentford and beat them, which means that we get European football and they miss out, that kind of adds an extra bit of spice to the derby. Or if it's vice versa, if they beat us and clinch Conference League football, then it gives it that kind of extra edge. So I actually do think it's going to come to that because I think it's so difficult. But Bournemouth Villa is the big one. We desperately need Villa to get a result. We need Villa to beat them. We need something to happen. But I do think when I look at the next two games, Everton and Brentford, I can't see us getting anything from City. we need 6 points. We have got to get 6 points, in my opinion, from our final three games. And Everton is going to be a difficult test. It's not going to be an easy one.
Yeah, exactly. It's. I feel like we say this a lot, like, oh, it's a must win, but no. This is a must win. Like, if we draw this one, I guess Southampton, to an extent, like anything less than a win
Mm.
wasn't adequate. But this one, like, yeah, if we drop points, even if we get a last minute draw or a draw, then yeah, can wave it goodbye. So yeah, that's going to be a huge game for the Bournemouth because. And the ironic thing is, if Palace win the FA Cup, none of this will actually matter. But that'd
No.
be typical. Imagine we grind and grind, we managed to clinch eighth spot, and then Palace win. It'd be typical. But
Just
yeah,
normally when I watch an FA Cup game, I always want the underdog. But trust me, when I'm going to be tuning in, I will be cheering on City, which will be the only time in my life that I will be supporting. Because my God, I
absolutely.
mean, I don't know how you feel about the FA Cup final, but I'm actually quite worried about it. I actually think that Palace could beat City.
Mm,
I think they've got every chance to get over the line because I think City are a bit. They've looked a bit. I mean, against Wolves recently, God, they were so lucky to win that game. I mean, Wolves hit the post about. I mean, the woodwork has been City's best friend. I mean, against Nottingham Forest, against Wolves, the woodwork was constantly getting hit. I do feel worried, but then again, De Bruyne, his swan song, his final trophy at the club, maybe he'll put in a 10 out of 10. But all of that won't matter if we don't even finish eighth, John. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
yeah, exactly. Finish eighth first, then worry about the FA Cup. Then it'd be the biggest Palace hate watch of all time. But yeah, it's
Uh,
a bit of a shame because I did say being the bitter man that I am. I don't want Palace to get their first major trophy before Fulham, but no, from like a
yeah,
football purist perspective, you like it'd be a great story. But let's see.
absolutely.
Do you know what would be quite funny actually if Brentford managed to finish eighth and then they miss out because of Palace? That'd be quite
True.
glorious.
True, that
But
would be pretty lovely. That would be great. Just have to
but
see.
yeah, my only other point from the Villa game was Sessegnon getting subbed quite early because I thought he was probably one of the only goal threats. But that got me thinking. Next topic, Marco Silva. As we said at
Mm.
the top of the show, I mean, the news broke yesterday, as you mentioned. We were going to record, but
We,
then the
we
news
both just
broke. We're
did a
like,
collect we both
yeah,
just did a collective sigh there, didn't we?
yeah. We were like, right, I need to go home and think about this. And yeah, I mean, so as Talksport understands,
Hmm.
47-year-old has been made an offer from Al Hilal, which is, of course, Alexander Mitrovic's club. He's got
Yeah,
42 goals in 46 games over there in that illustrious league. And yeah, they're Asia's most decorated club. They're going to be in the the Club World Cup this summer.
hmm.
They put in a bid for Bruno Fernandes as well. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Uh,
they're going for the Portuguese contingents,
yeah,
see.
already got Neves there, Ruben Neves. So yeah,
Hmm.
I wonder if that could maybe sway him. But as far as I understand, Oscar, he is open to the move, which is a bit concerning
Yeah,
because I know obviously Tottenham are sniffing around. I saw an article on Football Insider that said, I don't know how reliable it is, said that he'd be open to that move as well. So
yeah.
it's not, it's looking like he's open to move away from the cottage.
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one with Marco. I think that maybe he probably thinks how if he doesn't make European football this season, how much further can he realistically take this club, considering the finishes that we've had? I mean, if we just dissect his Premier League campaign at Fulham, first season finished 10th, incredible season, great way as a basis. Following season we finished 13th, but we get to the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. So we've had a bit of a cup run. Our first semi-final in about 16, 17 years. Then I do think that heading into this season with the signings that we've made, and obviously we've lost, I think it's important to mention as well, as you said there, we lost Mitrovic, we lost Palhinha, probably our two most influential players of the last 2 to 3 years. And we've still recovered and we've still managed to bounce back. And I think that Marco probably headed into this season. I mean, he even said it at the start. The clear goal was to get this club into European football. I think that he probably thinks that if he doesn't get Fulham into Europe this season, how much further can he take the club? And I do kind of agree with him to an extent because it's just like we play. magnificent football, and obviously we've got the new stadium, and the owners want to invest. But we do know that our owners, they're not exactly like the Villa owners. They're not exactly like Tony Bloom. We don't, Fulham are not a club that go out and spend even 100 million in a transfer window. And unfortunately, in this day and age of football, if you want to get into Europe, you want to be the Villas, you've got to be spending that level of money. And I just wonder on our ownership model, we don't really do that. We haven't really, I mean, and the last time that we did do that, it was an absolute disaster and we got relegated and it was a horrendously poor season. So they are very careful. But obviously, from a Marco's perspective, it is obviously tempting. We know that the superstars are there. I've seen, huge managers have gone. I mean, Stefano Pioli won the league with Milan, then he goes and joins Al Nassr. So managers can get swayed to go there, and I'd be really disappointed if he left, obviously, but I wouldn't be as disappointed as with the Mitrovic fallout because Marco has rejected. We know that he's rejected Saudi Arabia before. We know he's turned down mega bumper £1 million deals. So if he does decide to leave the club, then I wish him all the best because he's been an incredible servant to us, probably our best manager since Hodgson, and he has already shown loyalty to the club by staying when he could have jumped overseas and gone to Al Nassr. So I think it's a really difficult situation. I do think it really hinges on us making Conference League football, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. You said like what more could he do if the club doesn't make Europe? Surely it's make European football next season. Surely that would be his. I do take your point though. From his point of view, is like has he kind of hit the ceiling? Which we're going to debate that in a second based on
Mm,
on Danny Murphy's comments. But yeah, you made some interesting points there. And my big thing is I don't necessarily have an issue with him leaving. If it's to like say a European club that's in the Champions League or even Europa League or even Tottenham to an extent, because I think that's an ambitious move for him because of their stature. But to go into Saudi Arabia, I just think it'd be a bit gut-wrenching because he's
mm,
rejected. I think it was last summer. I think it was a £40 million move over 2 seasons to Al Ittihad. So he's
mm,
already rejected that because, and I remember being really proud of him because it's like he's speaks about ambition a lot, and fair enough. He wants to make it to the very top, and you can see
mm.
that with Fulham. So I just think it would just be kind of go against his values a bit, and he'd be swayed by the checkbook, which but then I mean, can you blame him? If you're talking about life-changing amount of money. I
Yeah.
mean, whether you have reservations about the Saudi Arabian regime, but
Mm.
that's not really his problem, I guess. But it's a life-changing amount of money. I kind of get it why people go there, but yeah, as I said, I just think it would go against his kind of what he said in the past, and yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think what you touched on is really important in terms of we know that Marco is so ambitious. We know this because he was at Watford. He did really well at Watford, and then he went to Everton, who are obviously a much bigger football club, didn't quite work out. He's come back to Fulham to kind of rebuild his reputation and his Premier League legacy. And he has, in my opinion, completely firmly rebuilt himself as an incredibly capable, forward-thinking manager who other clubs want. I do agree with you. I think if I'm being completely honest, if Al Hilal and Tottenham are both in for him, I would be shocked if he joins Al Hilal. I'd be really shocked. We could have a situation where Spurs get to the final and lose to Manchester United or Bilbao, but kind of Bilbao probably out of it. I can't see a world where United don't make the final now. Ange Postecoglou will probably get sacked if we're being honest. And then Marcus Silva will think Tottenham. I'm still in London. It's a big football club. I could be the one to kind of turn them around, bring his own kind of brand, his own kind of identity and style of football. Obviously, there was that old classic cliche Fulham Spurs link. It feels like everyone that's great at Fulham goes to Spurs. We've seen it over the years with Dempsey and Moussa Dembele. I do think he would choose Spurs over Al Hilal. I honestly do believe that. I think that of course, the money at Al Hilal is so enticing. And obviously, look, if he takes over and he gets to reunite with Mitrovic and he earns an absolute fortune, and if they bring in Bruno Fernandes, which you couldn't even rule out of the equation. I mean, who knows what will happen with Fernandes? If United lose the Europa League final, he'd probably be thinking, well, what's in this for me? No Champions League football, no Europe. United are floundering. Maybe I can just hop over and, live out the rest of my days and all my children's days pretty comfortably. I think he probably would go to Spurs, but It's just such a difficult one. But I do think as well, the important thing to note is that he has earned this. I think he's done a superb job at Fulham. I think it's gone criminally under the radar. We Andoni Iraola and Thomas Frank like every week they're sort of wax lyricals about them. Everyone's sort of all over them. I don't see that as much press about Silva. And with Danny Murphy's point, has the ceiling really hit for Fulham? Can he? I think he thinks they've taken them as far as they can. I think I sort of agree to a certain extent. I think it kind of hinges on how ambitious are our owners, really? I mean, how has Silva really properly been backed? Has he really got the players that he wanted? I think that there's been times, especially in January windows I've seen in the last few years, hasn't really been backed. I mean, I've said on the pod many times, been crying out for a striker, been crying out for attacking wingers, and we haven't really pushed the boat out. We haven't really signed any, like in January, we signed Broja on loan. We could have gone out there and signed a 20 million pound striker from the Bundesliga. We could have signed Silas. We could have signed someone who was probably going to get us a few goals. So I wonder really, it's not really just the case of whether Silva wants to stay, but it's with the case of, do the owner's ambitions match Silva's ambitions? And I think that if they don't, he's probably well within his right to say, well, I've taken the club as far as I can, and there's, as a famous Arsenal fan said, there's bigger fish to fry, and maybe I'm gonna jump ship. But I do agree with you. I think if he goes to Al Hilal, the Saudi league is a bit rubbish. Let's be honest. And I get why they're interested in him. They just lost in the equivalent of their Champions League semi-final to Al Ali. But Bobby Firmino, Mahrez, and Ivan Toney knocked out Al Hilal trio. So
What
that
simulation is this?
exactly. But I wish him all the well. But my opinion is we'll probably disagree on this. But I think that he has. I think if we don't make Europe this season, I think he probably has taken the club as far as he can. Really.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really interesting debate, isn't it? I don't think he has, and I'll tell you why. Because I think if you look at each of his Premier League seasons, each of his three, first one you touched on a lot of this, but first one loses Mitrovic, the most important attacker like by far, and then does no replacement. And then what he
Mm,
does with Rao and Muniz, I think it's absolutely unbelievable what he's managed to do. Same with
mm,
Palhinha. Loses Palhinha.
mm,
I know he signed Sander Berger, but it's not really a like for like replacement. So what does he do? He revolutionizes Lukic's position and creates an amazing double pivot. So his adaptability is amazing. And I wonder with a summer window where because let's be honest, losing Mitrovic and Palhinha was so disruptive. Imagine a
mm,
summer where he keeps all his best players and then builds. And as you said, if the Khans are ambitious, if you give him a lot of money to sign, I was gonna say world class number nine. We're not quite at that level, but a quality number nine who's going to get you 15, 20 goals, and a
mm.
quality winger, say maybe even a backup eight. I mean, considering he's had to kind of adapt and makeshift ever since we've been in the Premier League, imagine what he could do with a full pre-season and adding quality. I just think there's more we could see. And another point I want to make as well is I think with Raul Muniz, they're not going to get you. They're going to get you kind of 10 each a season, I think, really. I think his team relies on the wingers chipping in, which you saw with Iwobi and Harry Wilson at the start of the season. They were kind of chipping in the goals. But then when Wilson got injured and we know he's quite hit and miss. When his form dried up a little, like in terms of goal scoring, I think that's coincided with us being a bit more inconsistent. And I just think like how but that's not necessarily his fault. Do you know what I mean? I think he's kind of working with what he's got. But one thing I would say with Silva is if you'd asked me that if he said this at the start 6 months ago, I remember saying to you, I think he's the most important thing in this film, like in terms of losing him over any player. I kind of feel less like that now, just because I look at the options available out there, and maybe there's some shortcomings with Silva's tactics a little bit, and I like look at the football recently, it's a little bit stale at times. I would love him to stay. I want him to stay, but I think the options out there in Europe are kind of appealing a little bit. So I wouldn't be kind of as devastated as they would have been 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. I just think that, and I do agree. I think Marco's adaptability, squeezing the best out of the players that he's got, like turning sort of 5 and 6 out of tens into sort of 7, 8, 9 out of tens. I do agree with your point in terms of like I do think that if we keep our players and then rebuild, replenish, and add to the squad, he could take us to that level where we can push into Europe. But my biggest concern with it really is I'm not I don't question Marco's ability. I don't question the player's ability. I don't question his desires. But what I do question are the owner's ambitions. And my worry is really, it's not a case of I don't think that Marco's good enough and he's not, and he's a brilliant man manager. As you mentioned there, like we lose Polina, he gets Sanderberg and Lukic in a double pivot, superb. We lose Mitrovic, he gets the best out of a 33-year-old Raul Jimenez, who everyone thought was washed and finished. And he brings back Rodrigo Muniz, who had a pretty underwhelming loan spell at Middlesbrough, and turns him into a bit of a monster player. Well, a bit hit and miss, but we love him. And but my issue really is, do the owners believe that Marco can take them to the next level? And from what we've seen over the course of history, I'm looking at from a transfer window perspective. I don't think he has been backed enough. That's my biggest criticism. I think it's important that when you lose players, like as you said, we've lost Mitrovic, but we haven't really replaced him. Not really. We haven't had a target man bully striker who's going to get us 15 goals a season. Yes, we've got Raul. Yes, we've got Muniz. But you need consistency. There needs to be more consistency in the team. Or we constantly make these squad rotations, and I think sometimes it doesn't balance our squad. I think the other thing as well is we were crying out for a clinical right winger, and we bring in Adama Traore. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Adama Traore. He's come on, he's shown his mettle. We signed him on a free. We signed Ryan Sessegnon on a free. That was Sessegnon. I think has been better business than the Adama from what he's given us from a goal and assist output. But it's not exactly like Fulham went out and broke the bank and signed a quality left winger or right winger, which we really desperately needed to support Marco. I know that we signed Smith Rowe, but again, he's a player that has been a bit unsettled. He's had his injury problems. He's still trying to get adjusted to Marco's system as well. I think that he has been backed, but not backed enough to level with his ambitions. And when you're looking at the clubs, even when you look at a club like Bournemouth have got, they realise they address, they lose Dominic Solanke to Tottenham for 70 million. They go and get Evan Nilsson from Porto, and Evan Nilsson has been one of their best players this season. We haven't done that. We lose Mitrovic and we sign Raul for 5 million from Wolves. We lose Polina and we sign Sanderberg. And I love Sanderberg and I love Lukic, but they're no Polina. We haven't really replaced like for like. We have a case, I think, in my opinion, we have Lukic and Berg do the same job as what Zhao did, just as one. And I think that has been a bit of an issue. So it's not a case of if Marco's good enough. I certainly think that he is. He's been the best thing that's happened to this club in a very long time. But my issue is, do the owners think that he's good? And if the owners ultimately don't think that they think that he's taken the club as far as he can, and he thinks he's taken the club as far as he can, I think it's a very simple case of I wish him all the best and good luck to him. I do think as well, I do think it would be a bit of a like, well, what could have been if he'd just been backed a bit more in the summer? Maybe we could have pushed. And I also think that Marco might look at this season as well and go, we've had a great season, but it's important also to take into account that Manchester United and Tottenham have been dreadful, absolutely dreadful. There is no way next season they're going to be as bad. I just can't see it. I can't see Spurs and United occupying the positions they're in. So next season is going to be even harder for us to get Europe. Like we said this at the start a few weeks ago on the pod. If there was ever a time for an outsider club to get Europe, this is the year, because United and Tottenham had such a drop off that the likes of the Bournemouths, Fulhams, Brightons, and Brentfords need to capitalise on this opportunity. And obviously, insofar we haven't. And Nottingham Forest have been the shock package of the season. They've surprised everyone. No one would have thought they'd be in the position they're in. And that's why, in terms of one of the shock teams in those positions, it's been difficult. I do think that Marco probably thinks, well, maybe I have taken the club as far as I can. Of course, I'd like to see a season where he does get backed. But I sometimes think maybe that's come a bit too late. And maybe the owners might look at it and go, there are other managers out there. And I think I disagree with you slightly. I do think there are other managers out there that could come in and take the helm. And what I think is important, what Silva's done, is he's left his Fulham legacy is leaving a great team, a club that was in free fall, that was yo-yoing up and down, up and down. Now we are a steady Premier League side. And his legacy is that really, that he's got Fulham back to the Premier League, back to the promised land, and got us back to a football club that is incredibly competitive. And when he leaves, and if he does leave, decide to leave, he will get a fantastic reception. And every time he comes back to the cottage, I will stand up and give him a fantastic reception because he's been an amazing servant. And as you said, he could have gone to Al Ittihad, but he chose to stay at the club, and that shows real loyalty. Some players that we've seen, Mitrovic in particular, have not shown that level of loyalty. So he goes with my best wishes, and it would be really interesting actually to see who we would bring in to replace him. Actually,
Yeah, just touching on what you made earlier on missed opportunities. I feel like we've said that so many times this season, but I think you're bang on. Yeah, Spurs and United, they're going to be in the top half next season, definitely. They can't not be. And also the fact that the European spot has actually opened to eighth this season. Like English clubs might not necessarily get so many European spots next season. So yeah, I think you're right. This is best opportunity we've probably gonna have ever have to get a European spot. And also, as you were talking, I was just thinking, like a player's stock. So like Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example,
mm,
he knows he can get his move to Real Madrid because his stock is at an all-time high. But who knows, next season, what if his form falls off a cliff, he gets injured or whatever, and he doesn't get that dream move? I think it's the same with Marcus Silva. His
mm,
stock has never been higher as a manager because I think what he's done, I think he's been underrated, but I think he's started to get his flowers a little bit this season because I think people realise what he's done with this Fulham side is nothing short of amazing. I think he's been punching above his weight. Well, Fulham have been punching above our weight, but thanks to him all season. And yes, have we been inconsistent? Of course we have. We struggled
mm.
against bottom half sides, but the club that we are at the moment, that's going to happen. If we weren't inconsistent, we'd be pushing for Champions League, which isn't feasible. That's the nature of a mid-table side, is we're going to be
Mm,
inconsistent. I look at your Brighton's, Bournemouth, the teams around us, all slightly inconsistent. So
mm.
yeah, I agree.
I
Also,
think.
sorry, go on.
Sorry, I also think as well. Just coming back to that point, if he goes to Al Hilal, I think his career trajectory would tank. That's why I don't actually think he. I think that Silva probably because he hasn't really. We know that his contract expires at the end of next season. He's probably, as you say, he's biding his time. I think you make a really good point there. Sometimes your stock is a bit. It can be a bit hit and miss. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes you're the flavor of the week, and next minute you're the dog's dinner. I know that's a bit of a strange analogy, but you understand what I mean. I mean, you can be at the top of your game, absolute top, but then you make a wrong move or you don't leave at the right time and you don't really get that dream move. The person that I always think about from a player perspective, so it's a really this is a throwback is Michu. Do you remember when he was at Swansea and he hit that incredible goal season?
Mm,
And he was linked with the likes of the likes of like Man United. Decided to stay at Swansea. Following season, he was absolutely dreadful, and then no one ever wanted to sign him. And that is the same with managers. I do think. I think sometimes with a manager, the timing is so important. So I completely agree with your point there, and I think that if Spurs come in for him, unfortunately, I think he'd go, but he wouldn't go with bad blood. He wouldn't go with anything. He'd go with my best wishes, and he's joining up. And also, he wouldn't have to leave London.
mm.
He'd have to locate his family to Saudi Arabia, the other side of the world. So it's a really difficult situation. Obviously, I want him to stay, but again, it is the case of I think for the owners, it's like, well, we've got a brilliant manager. Let's try and convince him to try and stay because obviously
Yeah.
so far he hasn't renewed his deal, so there must be a reason behind that.
Yeah, just to clarify a point I made earlier as well. I was saying that a few months ago, I think it would have been absolutely catastrophic for Silver to leave. But now, I actually do think it wouldn't be catastrophic because
Yeah.
I look at, let's say, Bournemouth bring in Iriola, which by the way could actually save us from Spurs prizing Silver away because I actually think he might be a slightly more attractive manager right now. But anyway, you look at like Fabian Hertzler at Brighton. Look at all these quality managers coming in. I think there are managers out there which we could actually maybe discuss now, like who we could
Mm.
potentially bring. Also, by the way, nothing is confirmed yet. These are all sort of
True.
speculation at the moment. But there definitely are concrete rumors, put it that way. I
As
look
soon
at
as I see
managers.
as soon as I see the Fabrizio tweet, that's when I know,
Yeah,
yeah,
nah,
it's
mate.
a
Maturing is realizing Ornstein is the guy.
mm.
When I see the Ornicle, but I look at managers like I look at like Will Still in France. I look at Rossigna, which I think actually could be. I think he's destined to be a Fulham manager one day, given his ties to the club and his talent. And then Danny Roll. Do you want to talk to me a bit about Danny Roll? Because that was TalkSport, I believe,
Yeah.
broke that he's Fulham were looking at him.
Talksport been on today. Yeah, so we
Yeah,
understand this morning, Crookie again. He's had a long day today, Christ. We understand that Danny Roll wants to leave Sheffield Wednesday. Danny Roll is someone that I would love to see at Fulham. I'll say it in a few reasons why. So, firstly, we know that he's got 5 million release clause in his contract. That's fine. When Roll took over Sheffield Wednesday last season, they were bottom of the league and they were 17 points cut from relegation safety. He came in January and he saved Sheffield Wednesday from relegation. It's actually one of the greatest relegation escapes I've ever seen. He came in German, brilliant philosophy. He's done all his coaching badges. He's worked under Thomas Tuchel. He's been in part of the Bayern Munich backroom staff. He's worked with some big figures, big names, big egos. Goes to Sheffield Wednesday, who of course are a massive football club. They're a bigger football club than Fulham, if we're being brutally honest. A massive club, and completely turns them around. And then this season, stabilised a pretty bang average group of players, makes a couple of signings, and they slightly fell off towards the end of this season, but they were in the hunt for playoffs. And Danny Roll is someone that I really like. He's really young, very charismatic. I would say, and obviously, we've seen what's happened with Brighton, bringing in Fabian Herzler, a young, charismatic German manager, and you've seen how well he's done there. I think Danny Roll would really flourish at Fulham. I think that he should be that should be someone that the owners, if Silva does decide to leave, should seriously consider. But I love your Liam Rossigna shout. Absolutely. Rossigna, I mean, you look at Hull City, Jesus, they just about survived relegation. Don't count your chickens. They got rid of Rossigna and thought they could get bigger and it has completely failed for them. And Rossigna has done a brilliant job at Strasbourg. Um, Very, very good job there. And I like him. He's like a young English manager. Will Still as well. I saw his when he was on Sky Sports doing his analysis of his team. I thought he would just the way he comes across is incredibly impressive. So I do think that there are options out there, and I would like for them to go for a younger manager, the likes of the Rossignas or the Danny Rolls. In my head, I was thinking De Zerbi, but there's no way he'd leave
no,
Marseille to go to Fulham. He wouldn't sacrifice Champions League football. But I do think I agree with your point. Silva's legacy is that he's left a squad where if he does decide to leave, we will be capable. If Danny Roll comes in, or Will Still, or Rossinho, or whoever the club decide to go for, we will be in a stable position. But the question is, can the new manager do what Marco couldn't if we don't make European football this season? And that's going to be really interesting, really, really fascinating. But Rossinho would be like a fan, I think probably a fan's favourite to come in, wouldn't he?
yeah, exactly. It's a fascinating situation unfolding. To put my cards on the table, my first choice would be for Marcus Silva to stay. Of course, I just think with a new manager coming in, maybe a new manager could take Fulham over the line and really build on the foundation, almost like Slot with Klopp, but to a much lesser extent. But build on the foundations of what sort of was laid out. But it's high risk, high reward, isn't it? Because it could also go the other way. I don't think we're in any danger of getting relegated, by the way. But it could be a case of it takes a full season for them to kind of settle in and also I think what's underrated of Silva is the players buy into his system. And when players sign, a big reason, a lot of them is the manager, and they say the manager's vision, the manager's project. So maybe it could maybe unsettle the squad a bit, and for me, it's just the uncertainty when you manager. Whereas we know we've got a manager who's been there for 4 years. It'll be his fifth season next season, which is pretty amazing. Loves the club, the fans love him. I think that shouldn't be undervalued, the relationship with the fans. So, get your thoughts before we move on to Everton. Just is
Yeah.
that your first choice, Silver staying?
Absolutely. I mean, I would also reiterate your point as well in terms of like when's the best time to go. no one, not a player or a manager, is bigger than the club. That has always been my stance. And I think that if Silva thinks that he's bigger than Fulham, then I wish him well, but it's time to go. That's my opinion. Because I don't think we want a situation where he thinks he's bigger than the club, and then it kind of unsettles the balance of the team, and it kind of unsettles the hierarchy and the sporting director and their vision. No one is bigger than the club. I want Marco to stay, but if he decides to leave, he goes with my best wishes, and I hope that the owners will bring in a very capable manager for us to progress as a football club moving forward.
Yeah, I enjoyed that little debate. It was good. Again, this is very fluid news, isn't it? It's like I'm sure a lot's going to change in the next, even by the time we release this. But yeah, we'll
Mm.
of course stay abreast of it, keep you updated. Let's move on to, as we said earlier, a must-win game against Everton. And I just wanted to just throw this out there because I find it funny. 14th placed Everton, above United and Tottenham in 15th to 16th. Just thought I'd slip it in there.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, their last game was pretty of a rotter. So it's funny. We'll talk about David Moyes. When he came in, he's absolutely unbelievable. Completely different side to the Sean Dyche side. Picked up some amazing results. Their form has been a bit rotten in recent weeks. One win in 10.
Mm.
And that Ipswich game last time out. What's your thoughts on Moyes since he's retaken the job?
He's done an amazing job. I think he's an absolutely incredible job. I mean, he's averaging 1.3 points a game. I don't sometimes reading out stats like that because form was always a bit hit and miss. But when he took over, well, before he took over, Everton were in the mire, absolute mire. I don't know. I mean, the football was terrible to watch. They were losing all the time. There was no grit, there was no bite, and I was actually worried. I mean, Everton have always been teetering on the edge of relegation. I thought it was going to be quite a real possibility this season. I remember even before the season started, I thought Ipswich they made some good signings. They look ambitious. Maybe Leicester could do quite a good job with Steve Cooper, who I think is a great manager actually. But Moyes has been brilliant. He's shown his Premier League experience. He's made Everton a really difficult team to beat, a frustrating team to play against, and you've got to give him huge credit. And I have to say, it's quite a damning stat. He has got his most ever career wins against Fulham. Of course he has. Of course he has. 20 wins in 39 games. He's basically averaging a win every other game against Fulham, which is sad to see. But David Moyes is a manager that I admire. I think he's a brilliant manager. I think what happened to him at Manchester United was really difficult. Trying to take on the Sir Alex Ferguson mantle was always going to be tricky. Had a couple of difficult spells at Sunderland, Real Sociedad, and then completely rebuilt his career at West Ham, and obviously won their first ever European trophy. I'm a huge David Moyes fan. If Marco, I mean, it's too late now because he's at Everton, but I was thinking there was a time where if Marco did jump ship and he had to go, I would have Moyes in. I would have Moyes at Fulham, even though the football isn't exactly like pretty to watch. He just gets results. He just gets the job done. And yeah, I'm a big fan of David Moyes. I really like him. I think he's done a superb job at Everton.
Yeah, of course. Well, when last time out against Everton, it was Dyche, wasn't it? That
Mhm.
1-1 draw. I mean, that left a sour taste in the mouth. That Beto late goal, hoping
Yeah.
to avenge that. It is that classic. When you think of this season, you think of West Ham at home, Everton away, and Southampton at home as the kind of three what if kind of results. But yeah, anyway, I think yeah, in terms of this game, am I reading too much into this? Their last ever game at Goodison is next week. Will it
Mm.
almost be a case of like Arsenal resting, sort of taking the foot off the gas for the game against Champions League because they've got nothing else to play for, or I don't know, am I reading too much into it? Good
I
time
don't
to
think
play them, I mean, kind of thing. With they might be off the ball a bit, but maybe not.
I think Moyes is probably looking at it and thinking it'd be quite nice to finish above Manchester United, my former club. Do
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
He's probably looking at that as well. I don't think so, if I'm being honest. Of course, all eyes will be on Goodison next week for their final ever game. What an iconic stadium, by the way. It's going to be a bit of a shame not being able to. I actually never went to Goodison Park ever, so I'm a bit disappointed that I never got to experience that. But I don't think Moyes is the kind of manager who will just let the players take their foot off the gas because they've got a big one at home. And also, it's at home to Southampton. I don't think it's exactly like they have to exert themselves massively against one of the worst teams
True.
we've ever seen in the league. So I think it's going to be a really tough game. They're going to make it really, really difficult for us. I do say I think the big bonus for us heading into it is that Tarkowski's injured. I think
Mm,
he is arguably their second or one of their best defenders. Obviously, I think Branthwaite's brilliant, but Tarkowski, he's one of those bullish defenders, isn't he? He's frustrated me over the years, especially when he was in that Burnley side under Sean Dyche. Honestly, they were absolute brick walls. So I do think that's a huge blow for Everton. They've got a couple of good players. Beto, Iliman, and Di is excellent. Apparently, Beto might be on his way to Leeds, which is a bit of
oh,
the books, yeah,
niche.
which is
Niche.
very niche. But they're going to make a 30 million bid for him, that'd be an interesting signing if they manage to pull that off. But I think it's a difficult game, but it's a must win, John. We have to beat Everton. Anything less than 3 points, I think the season's over, if I'm being honest. I still think even if we went to the GTEC and won and picked up 4 points from a possible nine, I don't think that will be enough. I don't think that's going to be enough to get us over the line. So we've got to beat Everton. And they have a terrible record against Fulham. They haven't beaten us in 5 years in all comps. The last thing they did was at Craven Cottage, though, unfortunately, with the Calvert-Lewin brace, and then good old everyone's pantomime villain, Richarlison, popping up with a goal there as well. But yeah, I do think I think Everton fans will always say that Fulham is a bit of a bogey team because they haven't beaten us in so long. But we've got to get 3 points. I think anything less, and the season has it's sort of like ended in a bit of a waffle. It's just sort of filtered out
Mm,
into nothingness, really, of a season which had a lot of promise.
yeah. I do. It's funny. Before the Villa game, we were in eighth, so in the driving seat. I actually wonder if being in 11th and kind of chasing a pack actually kind of favors us a bit in terms of mentality. I think we maybe play better with the handbrake off and kind of with less pressure. So that's something to think about. So before we do lineups and score predictions and all that, where do you see this game kind of won and lost? What do Fulham? You mentioned in Die they got their midfield's pretty underrated, I think. But well, yeah, is it a case of getting better of that nullifying the midfield? Where do you see this game won and lost?
I think I think the number one crucial thing that Fulham need to do is they need to avoid conceding set pieces. I look at Everton's
Yeah,
team;
exactly.
they've got monsters in there. I mean, Beto, Branthwaite, O'Brien. They're all absolute bullies in there. So we need to try and avoid conceding as many set pieces as possible. I think the area that we could try and get down, I think, is their left flank. I look at their left side, they've got Alcaraz, Garner, and Mikalenko. I think that Sessegnon can definitely try and get at them. I think Mikalenko is a decent player, but I think that Sessegnon can definitely try and get at them. And obviously, look, they've got Jordan Pickford, and Pickford on his day. I remember this game last season, he was their man of the match. He's just making save after
Mm,
save after save. So I think where we can win it is by keeping I mean, I know it sounds simple, but just not keeping the ball in the clouds. We've got to make sure we try and zip it around them because Everton love the ball in the sky and Beto being their target man and winning cheap fouls and Dwight McNeil swinging it in and causing problems. So I think that's what we really, really have to do. And I'm confident that we're going to get a result. I think in terms of a lineup perspective, I wouldn't be changing to the team that played against Villa. I probably wouldn't be starting Harry Wilson if I'm being honest. I just don't think he's ready. I don't think he's fresh enough quite yet. But I think that I think we're gonna scrape it. I think it could be sort of a 2-1 to the boys really. But I really hope we're gonna get the 3 points.
yeah, I think this is potentially the kind of side that we really struggle against this season. Because they're going to be happy to be fair, they don't park the bus or anything. They're not like that. But in terms of they're going to be happy to sit back and let us have the ball, which we kind of famously struggle with. So I think it's a case of yeah, as you say, the set pieces is going to be crucial. Like not feeding into that how they want us to play and just kind of trying to play our own game as much as possible.
Mm,
Lineup wise, so Pereira was actually out of the squad last week, which is interesting. I don't know what the latest on him is, but I would, I'd probably start Smith Rowe. I
mm.
would start Smith Rowe because I thought he was good against Southampton. And then again, really get quiet when he came on against Aston Villa. But this is, like we say this every week, but this is the game for him. This is where he's going to have hopefully lots of the ball and unpick
Mm.
a potential low block. And we saw against Southampton his movement, he linked with Iwobi to break that low block. That could be exactly what we need. So I would probably actually start Smith Rowe. And I think the rest of the squad kind of speaks for itself. Maybe the front three will be interesting.
Mm.
Um, well, actually, there's no Rodrigo Raul debate anymore. It's
Hmm.
going to be Raul with
Yeah.
big Vinicius on the bench coming on. And I think the only kind of debatable positions really are the left wing, the right wing, and the number 10.
Mm.
Um, I'm just trying to think. I'd probably stick with Iwobi. I'd go with Iwobi and Sess on either flank.
Yeah.
That's what I'd do with Smith Rowe and the 10. You anything different?
I exactly the same. And actually, when we were talking about Smith Rowe's movement, obviously, who can forget his lovely little spin before Iwobi's goal at Goodison when we played them in that game. So yeah, I do Iwobi, I do Smith Rowe with Sess, Raul up top, and then the unchanged team, unchanged defense and goalkeeper really. And I just hope the boys clutch through. I mean, and also for Marco as well to try and get one over his old club. That's obviously going to be important for him as well. Um, and look, I mean, as I know, I know we're circling back around to Marco again, but he'll probably want to end the season, on a high, won't he, to try and attract more of the suitors. So, and it's our second last home game of the season. It's Everton. They haven't beaten us in 5 years. They've kind of got nothing to play for. We've got everything to play for. So the boys, they don't need too much motivation to get them ready for this game, but they've really got to step up. I really hope to God that we do something. And I agree with you, Smith Rowe. We always say this every week, but he's got to turn up. We need a goal, we need an assist, we need something, and Iwobi against his old club as well. So
Oh, yeah.
we'll see. But I'm confident that we're going to get 3 points. What would be your score prediction?
I think we'll win. I think we will win,
Hmm.
but a tight win. So I'm almost inclined to go for like a gritty 1-0.
Yeah.
Maybe with an Everton disallowed goal or something, So it's not going to be like a, you know, a stroll in the park on Saturday. I think it's going to be a bit gritty. But just quickly on Moyes as well, I don't know if I've told you this, my dad used to look like him. Not so much
Oh,
anymore, but when he was at Everton the first time round, he used to get mistaken for David Moyes quite a lot. I remember we're
really?
yes, it was actually absolutely hilarious. We were actually at a Fulham game last season or the season before, and then he was queuing for a beer, and these like German guys came up to us, oh, can we get a photo? And my dad thought that he meant take a photo of them, and they were like posing with him. I think they
Hmm.
thought he was David Moyes showing himself on the concourse, but yeah, there we go. So we're both predicting a win on Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff. It's a huge game. Oscar, before we wrap up, anything else to add?
Yeah. Hope we need 3 points. We need Marco to stay, and we need a strong end to the season. That's all I've got to say, John.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's a Chat GPT summary of this episode. Yeah,
Exactly.
but yeah, Oscar, thanks for joining me this week. As always, it's been a good episode. Um, and yeah, thank you for listening. Listening on Spotify, watching on YouTube. We'll be back next week to discuss that Everton game and a huge preview against Brentford at the G-Tech. I cannot wait to preview that. Also slightly nervous.
Hmm.
But yeah, thank you, Oscar. Thank you for tuning in. Please leave us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter and Insta at Craven Pod. And until next week, up the Fulham.